those of you who don't know what indirect is, that's basically the federal government gives us a certain percentage of all of our federal grants, percentage of that, and we're allowed to take a small percentage of that, and we use that to offset our business office costs, basically. And then where it says reduce, it was supposed to say we were reducing the transfer from our general funds into our CIP funds down to 200,000. We normally put about 400,000 every year. Basically, that helps us cover all of those emergency things that we're fixing and repairing things that always come up every single year. We put some money in there. It also helps us save for our larger projects, given that the state continues to not fund us, which we're hoping will change this year. Those are the assumptions.
All right, I just got another question. Are you able to move the funds back and forth out of the CIP?
We can, but it does require a board. Typically, what requires the board to make an action item to actually formally approve moving school funds out of CIP back into general funds.
But if you decide like not to do a capital project, then can you move that back into the operating fund?
We can. But again, like I said, when we take the money out of the savings account, we don't like to do that on a regular basis because if you live off your savings, eventually you got no savings. Okay. So the next slide is, so between now and then, what's the bad news? Okay, bad news is fuel costs are drastically up. So when we went out and had the conversation with Mayor Handeland, this is typically the time of year where we go out and we say, okay, we're ready to make our purchase with the city. And the first bid that came in, of course, was massively over what we had originally projected. So when we looked at how much we wanted to buy, based on the projections, we knew we were going to increase the number of gallons. This year was a very cold year, wind chill factor. That we did last year, so we ate into our reserves a little more than we had projected last year, so we were going to increase that. So we were looking at an increase of probably anywhere around, we were looking at about $275,000 more than we had originally budgeted. It's huge. Okay, so again, the conversation with the mayor was like, we're not going to lock the price in now. We're going to cross our fingers and hope that it will come down. And we purchased right along with you guys, so we're hoping that was a good move. But still, even if the price does come down, it's not going to come down obviously. We're still going to look. We were also, when we started to have the conversation with our insurance carrier, they originally told us that if we did not go out to bid, that we were looking at a potential increase of 20% in our health insurance premiums. That's also very large. We pay for 85% of our employees' health insurance premiums. Are partially self-funded plan, and we had seen usage as far as what our employees used, and that's probably part of the pandemic. People, when the pandemic first hit, people didn't go anywhere and basically sat tight, didn't do anything. And then as we got further into it, people began to travel. Procedures and things could not be put off any longer. We also saw some employees that had some very large and significant health insurance costs. So we're currently out to bid. It's going to be difficult for us to cover. We are also beginning our classified negotiations this year. So again, we are probably going to see some requests from our employees. Those are bad news. Again, we have to figure out how we're going to cover that in our budget. Okay. Next slide. So there's some possible good news on the horizon. So the same thing that caused our fuel increase cost. So that's all being debated right now. House is debating the budget. At the same time, the Senate is now also debating the budget. So we are monitoring what's going on.
Sorry.
It's a coffee break.
It won't be done.
That's okay. Anyway, so the legislature is currently, there's a House bill going through right now. Legislature has not increased the base student allocation for 6 years. We've been flat funded for 6 years in a row. We finally have legislation on the House floor right now that's proposing to increase the BSA. Right now, there's one that proposes to increase it this year and then next year, and there's a separate bill that proposes at the third year to tie it to the consumer price index. Rumor has it that the increase one has a possibility of passing. The one-time consumer price increase has a much poorer chance of passing. There's also the conversation right now of where they put into the budget a potential one-time appropriation of $57 million, kind of where they're saying if the House Bill 272 doesn't go through, then we'll give you a one-time appropriation of $57 million. We would, those of us in education would much rather have the BSA because that is permanent one-time. There you go. Rather than one-time funding is very difficult for us to build a budget around because it's difficult for us to say we can pay teachers, we can, fund positions, because one time means one time means we have to fight for it again the next year. So that's actually right now, there are several amendments on the floor, actually, a couple of them to actually make it a little higher. There's one amendment to make it higher for 1 year and then not increase it again. We don't want that, but anyway. So there's a lot of arguments on the floor. However, we also heard rumors that the government is threatening to veto, if we do the 57 million, some sort of an accountability package, because that's always the argument on the other side. Well, if we give the districts the schools more money, score, terrible scores, we're on the bottom and everything like that. So why throw money at you if you don't do a good job teaching? And our conversation is, you've been throttling us, starving us for years, and what do you expect? So anyway, we don't know. But if we do get kind of one or the other are going to kind of roughly should come out the same place, that would give us, Nome Public Schools, dollars. If probably in the middle of May, and I have to pass a budget next week. That's my challenge. Okay. Next slide. There we go. Okay. So some other potential possible good news is now they're also talking about, since they have some more money, giving us some money for capital projects, which they have also not done a good job of funding for several years. So right now on the list of major maintenance projects, Nome Public School has 2 projects. The highest scoring projects that we have are sitting at number 24 and number 25 on the list. Spent the money and taken care of them. One is the boiler rebuild that we did, which is to the tune of about $108,000. And the second one is the Anvil City Science Academy restroom project, which the city paid for. If then that would give us about $325,000 back to go back into our CRP funding, which is good. But the city would have to put about $60 million into the budget to get down to those projects. That's how far down they are on the list, about $60 million. If they get even further, we still have 2 other projects that are sitting down there, one of which is the replace the fire alarm system at the elementary school, and the other one is to refurbish the generator, the emergency generator, and some other electrical work at the high school. I think they would have to get a lot closer to about $100 million to reach those 2 projects. So we don't know where they're getting, but again, see is how much money will they actually put in. So the question is, how can the city how can you guys help us out? So one thing, and this is kind of what I'm asking conversation to have with you guys tonight, is at $3.1 million, you are 85% of the cap that you can do based on our current enrollment. If our enrollment goes up, we could get this. That's my conversation and my request for you guys tonight. Is the city willing to go? District do? If you guys say, hey, 3.1 is the best we can do, good luck. That's the next one. If the legislature doesn't come through, so what can we do? We can say, well, we can put no money into CIP. We do get through. We can do that. That's never good, but we do have money in there. We have about $3 million sitting in there. $667,000 of that is earmarked towards the roof project, which we have put back out to bid again. That project again is kind of one. It's the same. Got the same problem that we did when we took the apartment out to bid. When we went out to bid with it, everything is now times more expensive. Some people just don't even want to look at it. We've got fingers crossed that somebody will want to bid it and we can get it down enough that we can actually get at least a portion of the roof fixed. The Department of Education doesn't have extra money to say, oh, I'm sorry, that's more expensive than you thought. It will just give you some extra money. That's not the way it works. State, we have a contributing, so we have $667,000. Get the money, we have to pay that much of the project. So that part's earmarked. The same thing, if they decide to give us enough money to fund the elementary school system, we have to come up with a portion of these projects as well. It's great, it gives us money, but we have a portion of it. So probably about $1.4 of that. So about half of it, poof, would be gone. Then we also have, we may have other potential things that are coming up. Agencies that we're dealing with. And we've been spending with everything on. We've been spending roughly about $300,000 a year. That's why we try to put that money back in there. Nothing, and we spend $400,000. That $3 million thing going on will disappear relatively quickly. And then what do we have when we have emergencies? We got nothing, or we have to come to the city with our hand out and saying, you got to fix it, shut down the school. So another thing we can do is just start cutting things to the budget. Say no supplies, guys. So you gotta make do with what you already have in your budget. We can cut student travel and tell the kids you just can't go anywhere, or you can fundraise the heck out of it, out of everything. Staff doesn't travel very much. We can say we just don't go to job fairs. We just go to online. I don't go anywhere for any travel. So we cut all of that, and then the last resort is always having to cut positions. So I don't want to be Chicken Little. I don't want to go out there and say the sky is falling. I don't want to riff people based on budget, and then have like Anchorage and other places where they pink slip people and then they try to hire them back. Luxury that those large road districts do, because those people don't tend to go places. They get pink slipped, they probably tend to hang around. If I pink slip teachers up here, they'll leave. They'll go to Anchorage, they'll go to Juneau, they'll go to Fairbanks, they'll go to the lower 48, and then they won't come back. We're already struggling with trying to fill the positions that we do have. Classrooms or multi-grade classrooms. I don't ever want to have to go down that road unless I know that's kind of where I'm at. So to document there. I get a lot of questions sometimes. I really kind of wanted you to see, and that's the one that I sent to Brian. So this position side of general fund. And I wanted you guys to see how many teachers and other positions we have. So we have positions that come out of what I call our non-competitive grants. So these are just money that we just get every year. These are our formula grants. So we get our title grants, and out of that, we have our Director of Federal Programs, Megan Hayes. 70% of her position is paid out of, we just draw a certain amount of money out of all the title programs, and that pays 70% of her position because about 70% of her responsibilities are involved in managing 30% other things. Like she does a lot of work with her assessments and other things like that. So that's why we pay 70% of her salary out of these title programs. So we have a Title 1A grant, and out of that we pay one of our Title 1A reading teachers, and we have a Title 1 reading aide. And there are teachers that run that program that's focused on specifically supporting students that are struggling to read. See, that's our migrant education grant. And right now, we have been able to, because of how our migrant students have been scoring on state assessments versus all of our non-migrant students at the elementary school, just funds together as we needed. However, that has changed, and our migrant students are now scoring lower. But prior to that, we had we were able to have a counselor, and we were paid for that with our Title 1C funds. However, that circumstance has changed, and so because of that, we may move her into one of our emotional learning and support for our students, but that is funded outside of general funds. We also have our migrant program specialist at the district office. Half of her salary, she's paid half as a private migrant program specialist, and the other half of her job is she is the Anvil City Science Academy secretary. So she spends half of her day doing each thing. So she's paid half out of migrant funds and half out of general funds. Education grant, and the Indian Education grant pays 3/4 of the cultural studies teacher at the elementary school. And then it pays full of one of our emerging classrooms.
Is cultural studies, I mean, is that the language programs?
No, those are not. That's not for the immersion program. That's completely separate. Those, we pay those out of general funds, those immersion teachers, because they are considered one of our classroom teachers at that grade level. And then out of our COVID funding right now, we have programs are moved on to that. So that means when the COVID funds run out, those positions disappear. And just hired an after-school program coordinator. Just finally found somebody. So she's working on plan. We're hoping to get at least some. Also have a custodian at the high school out of the COVID fund. So our budget picture has improved.
Very, very, very briefly, can you just say what the after-school program is?
I'm sorry?
Is the after-school program, is that what Richard used to do?
Kind Not
Science
exactly, but
fairs,
kind of something a little bit similar to that. But we really want something that's more kind of like a 21st century grant program where we really want to just have something after school that goes until around 5 o'clock is what we're kind of focusing on, where we have some for kids, so it has nothing to do with need or income level or anything. We just want something to be right there at the elementary school for all of their kids that are interested to just be there. So, because we know that there's kids can still go and participate in like Boys or Girls Club because it'll end around 5 o'clock. See if we can kind of weave in there an existing kind kind of incorporate that, because we know there's a lot of other programs that happen throughout. Just really want to offer some options and things for a lot of our kids, because, there's a lot of need there, for, places for little kids to go is after school. I mean, we know that, daycare and childcare and everything is a massive problems for families. We just say, hey, we just want, this is no cost. There'll be fun things for the kids to do of all ages. So we're working on developing what that will look like. We wanted to get that started early. That, and of course, find good people first before we can get the programs rolling. So several funds that we go to our partner community partners. Term aid was funded out of donation. We had the money kind of sitting there, and that was used. We've been using it to do a lot of to pay people to do a lot of the translation and everything like that, a lot of curriculum work for those classes, and then initial funding is running out. So we're gonna have to go back out to sit in this lockdown conversations about them for next year. Able to hire the second cultural studies teacher at Nome, because many years to both work on kind of both the traditional male and female roles. It's Island Yupik culture. And then at some point in time, the funding started to disappear. And then with attrition, we ended up with just one. And this way, Phil Swallow there for a long time. And then she kind of semi-retire. And then we hired Anna. He's been great because he brought the male perspective back in there. The kids loved it, but they missed a lot of what Phyllis did, and Phyllis missed the kids, so Phyllis wanted to come back. So she's back. But again, now that has to be outside funded because we don't have enough Indian education funding to cover her position. So Nome was able to bring some funding, but they're trying to get the grant renewed. We're working on that. And then the college and career guide position that Sitnasoc had funded for us for this. So we're seeing that we're having some personnel changes, and we're moving the gentleman that's currently our college and career guide is finishing his counseling degree. They're excited. They're going to be moving a lot of what the college and career guide position has been doing into our campus. Not going to have a college and career guide because all of the college and career guide stuff will now be part of it. Try to get that cultural studies teacher funded for next year. But again, these are things every year we do our little begathon there to try to get these things funded. But I just kind of wanted you guys to see that there's a lot of stuff that comes outside of what the state gives us in order for us to kind of positions. And this COVID funding is kind of stopgapping a few things. Disappears. So those behavior specialists, those support positions have been really key. Struggling with mental health. We're seeing behavior issues off the charts really this past year, even though we haven't been having a lot of kids home. We're been seeing all of the stresses that have been happening in people struggling with the illness, anxiety, concerns about job loss, concerns about potentially being homeless. That it's showing up in the kids, kids struggling with schooling, kids struggling with working with their peers, kids struggling with so much divisiveness in our community, in our state. And the kids are really picking up on that. They're showing up. Where we don't, like the behavior specialist was kind of a place where kids could go. They just kind of sometimes just needed a place that wasn't in the classroom to cool down. And we don't have those positions. then we end up suspending kids. It's not kids in school. I would rather we would just, be mad or just talk to somebody that isn't their teacher or anything like that, and then be able to send them back to school. Conversations about we're gonna have to suspend you, you need to go. Escalate to the point where, we've had the so it's a little stressful when we can't put these, these positions have to get shifted to money that's gonna be gone. Positions still go away. The conversation is who's gonna pick up the slack. Terry is gonna be principal. This is the conversation that we have when we come to you and we say, this is why, even though we're state still does their job and funds us better, this is still part of the conversation when we come to you. Closer to the cap for funding. Especially if, there's other expenses that we're still going to be looking at. Insurance expenses, even if the city comes, even if the legislature comes through. But I'm open to.
Slides, did it say that you have low turnover?
Our turnover isn't too bad, but I think it's about average this year. I'd say, so we have minimal staffing changes as
That's what I
opposed to-
said, minimal.
We're not making any plans in,
Okay.
like adding or changing any positions.
Okay.
So we're not making right now in that original budget, we weren't planning on adding or cutting any positions. We've seen some pretty significant turnover at the high school. But right now we have, all those positions are filled with exceptions we're still looking. So, Mr. Thomas is leaving us. Scovia Smith should be our new principal next year. She's our current assistant principal.
So your teachers you filled, how did you get them?
Most of them have been through our online portal. We're using some of our COVID funding for a little bit for recruitment and retention. So we're basically doing kind of a little bit of a year-end bonus with some of our, as a thank you for people, that have kind of stuck with us throughout the year. Bonus that will be paid out when people come back next year. And then we do a referral bonus. If you refer somebody and they sign with you.
I was looking back, great presentation, by the way. It's really easy to follow a lot of the graphs and stuff, so I think it was your CFO that did that. Compliments or questions. It looks like I get the right, I think it was in FY 18, there was a pretty significant increase in the city's contribution to somewhere averaging between 3 and 3.1 million.
It was $3 million. I have talked to Jamie, increasing it to 100,000. We haven't had much conversation because I'm not still sure where we're standing, and I don't know when you actually have to pass, your budget. 3.1 is going to be in the proposed budget, and you'd like to put some more money in.
That's what I'm telling you tonight. I'd like to put more money in.
makes it easier for, I mean, I'm not, look, we're all, she's, we just finished up, I hope, our labor contract agreement. That's what's discussed tonight. You're just entering yours, or you,
Having our negotiations with our classified association. So we haven't even, we literally just opened negotiations, so we haven't even seen any proposals with them regarding wage increases or anything like that. That has not even, we're having probably our first real discussion with that won't happen until April 21st.
I'm not gonna ask any more questions. Yeah,
What was that for? Or what was the purpose for that? Was just to bring it closer to the maximum contribution? I don't know, maybe. So,
I wasn't here.
and the reason I asked the question, it looks like in the following years, the CIP really, on average, jumped to about 3 million. So the question I have is, did we fund that increase so that the schools could have a larger CIP fund to address either general or specific capital improvement issues?
The initial time was because the state was decreasing their funding, or intended to decrease their funding. I think they ended up coming back. They came back up to 100%, but they came back to a certain level that wasn't as great as anticipated.
I think that was the first year when we started to have the state started running way late.
Yeah.
When they started
Before
pushing.
they knew how much they were gonna get.
They weren't even getting to their budgets done until July, and they were just leaving us hanging. And so we didn't, there was a real concern about whether we were going, and there was the threat of potentially whether they were gonna fund or not. So I think that was a lot of the conversation around that point in time of the city at least was trying to step up to kind of make some potential stopgap on what the legislature was going to do. That's where we really started to get into this, where they're leaving us hanging. And then there was the potential, I think one year where, I was probably 2 years ago, where they didn't even get us our funding until literally the last minute. There was literally the threat for districts. Districts were trying to figure out how much cash did you have in the bank and how long could you potentially go, because they were really to the money. There was actually a lawsuit filed to actually finally get the governor to release funds. It was
Yeah, so at least one of the benefits of that increased funding was that Nome Public Schools was able to increase their savings. And it's pretty much stayed at that 3 million, when previous to that, we were under 1 million. Yes, the second question is, obviously CIP expenses have been quite a bit below. Finish that.
Yeah, but
Is that an ideal balance or savings balance for the Nome Public Schools that they're comfortable with? Is that 3 million in savings?
like I said, part of that 3 million is, earmarked for these projects coming.
Right.
So, the 3 million is not I wouldn't say the 3 million is like a normal balance. The 3 million part of it is because we know we have hopefully these projects coming, but, as literally, if you've seen our CIP list, if we get these projects funded, we got some. So we're always going to have, as soon as we have projects funded, we've got some more projects that we then want to put on the list. And anytime we have a project that we submit, we have to make sure that we have our share has to be ready to go. So we have to have enough in the savings that if the state funds it, we have to make our share saved and ready to go. So, we can talk about here's your annual spending on, on what we call capital projects. You have to replace vehicles. For example, that doesn't come out of general fund. I've got 10, 12, 15-year-old vehicle. I'm gonna have to replace it. You guys all know what they're like after a while. Any number of projects that the state is not going to, any things that are just small. The state doesn't fund anything under, emergency repairs, things like that, like when the sewer went out in the elementary school. I don't have time to wait around, put a project in, wait to see if the state's gonna fund it. See funds, I have to have, small projects. I have any number of things. As I said, having that 400,000, that seems to be kind of what's going out. So I have to put it in knowing it's going out. But then I always have to have, there's some stuff above and beyond, then I have to have money for the big projects. So is 3 million on the high side? Yeah, it's on the high side, but that's not like that. I think it's a reasonable rainy day money to say we probably should always have money somewhere between 2 to 3, knowing that there's stuff always coming down there. I mean, unless the heavens open up and somebody drops $100 million and we fix everything that's wrong, that's good, then we can probably say, yeah, we don't need any money for a while. But we all.
Certainly wasn't a criticism. I was just asking if that was.
That's why I'm saying.
The.
So, did it have us to put enough money in there? Take care of it, while waiting for the state to get their act.
The other question I had, I don't remember what she was, it was kind of a breakdown of the expenditures, and there was a category called purchase services. I think it was about $1 million, if I recall. Is that the food service contract?
That is our contract with Nome Management Services.
Is there stability in that contract? That does it go year to year and subject to?
It's a contract that we bid with renewals that we can do without having to go back out to bid again. So I think it's been what, 7?
As a general rule, is that a good cost-effective mechanism as
I think when
opposed
you
to?
started, it was cost effective. There's been a lot of conversations lately if it is. If it, at this point in time, it has saved us money over time. However, we've had some conversations lately about, some circumstances about whether there's pure cost savings, but, there's been, I think we're running into some things and maybe some potential drawbacks where we're going back to reassess whether overall it's in the best interest. of the
Turnover
district.
and things like that.
Yeah.
That
A
include
lot
food
of
and
things like,
maintenance contract in there as well?
Yeah, we have
Not just food.
Yeah.
Right, it's, I think, maintenance, buildings, vehicles.
maintenance and custodial. Yeah.
Okay, I just curious if it's a good thing or not.
Yeah. That's all kind of all lumped together. Yeah, and so, so that covers all of their wages, and that covers, basically a large portion of, materials, purchases and everything like that. There are some things that they do that end up going outside of their contract with their permission. But because they do a markup, that's how they make their money. But occasionally we do stuff just because it's either faster. We do things faster, but anyway, so that's what that big lump is down there at the very, very, very end. That's close to $2 million.
One final criticism
No.
regarding the apartment building.
Mhm.
Obviously, highly subsidized rents.
Yes.
Are those adjusted periodically when costs go up?
Especially when it comes to like fuel costs and things like that. I've raised the rents. It makes the teachers mad at me. I've raised the rents.
Sure.
And I had them ask, and it's like, are you gonna raise the rent again? And I'm like, no, I haven't raised it every year, but I've raised it a couple times since I've been here. And I think how often my predecessors have chosen to raise them. But I have.
Because they are substantially below.
Absolutely. And I know, and I absolutely know. And it's, like I said, when people get in there, they don't want to get out.
Imagine, yes.
I have a follow-up on that. The accommodations out there are below standard for a lot of the other places in town also, right? I mean, it's not top of the line apartment.
It's a
Furnishings,
1965.
Exactly. So also, so it would stand to reason that the rents would be a little lower. And the school district is not losing money on that building, correct?
We have, uses that we have for that building is basically, we pay the heating cost because that entire campus is heated off of the.
Right. But you allocate something to
Yeah,
that
we
building?
can. We have a, know the square footage and everything like that, and the fuel costs, we determine that, we have a certain, but we know how much the electric is for, the fire system, and we pay the trash, and, we know what the operating costs are for that building. That's pretty much what we pay. We fund for savings, because if we have repairs that must be made to the building, that's what the department fund. is
And where
for.
do you get the money for that repair fund?
That comes out of rents.
Okay,
We
so
get-
there's
we get
not a,
nothing, we can request nothing from the, the
there's,
state will not pay for anything.
Right. so there's nothing in the school district budget that would really be a subsidy to rents for that.
But if we put, that's why if we put a little money in the fund, and basically all of the rents that we receive go into the apartment fund. So take some money out of the apartment fund for something. We just leave the money in the apartment fund. So if we have to, like we're looking at potentially, we may need to do some siding replacement on that building.
But
That comes out of the apartment fund, so we don't take money out of the school district, out of the general funds to pay.
call a couple of times, and maybe you weren't here, but where the school district actually took money out of the apartment fund and put it into the general fund to help subsidize education, I
They
guess.
could, yes, they certainly could, and that would be up to
And
the.
they have.
Yeah, that would be up to the-
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify.
Just like we take our money, if we need to do it at the end of the year. State caps how much money we can keep in our savings. Other than that, for whatever reason, we didn't spend it, then we have a variety of funds, and we decide where, that allows us to put money in other, CIP is one place we can put it, but our apartment fund is another place that we can put money. To put money. Yeah, they haven't indicated to us. So again, that revenue actually does go into our general funds.
Right, I just didn't, specific,
It is an annual lease.
okay.
It's just a year-to-year lease, but noise to that effect.
Well, we hope not, but I mean, they keep pulling more and more people and
At some point in time, they could just tell us that they're going to shut that particular.
Is that on an annual basis?
Genevieve, do you remember off the top of your head the annual income from the DOT?
It's $18,000 a month.
ABC, it seems like.
Mhm.
It's Indian Yes, there used to be this Title VII that was the cultural thing. I mean, how does this Title thing?
So the Title I AA funds are specifically for low income. And that is based on literally on the number of students you have. It's a formula grant, most of the federal, most of the state, and then the rest of their formula. And we have chosen to use the Title R for, because we are a very small district, under 1,000 students, and our poverty level, as we calculate it, is roughly the same at all of our schools. We have elected to place it at an elementary school. We also get what's called Title I-C, that's our migrant funds, and that's strictly based on the count of our migrant students that we do. That's what we do every year when we're calling all them, doing all the interviewing with the families and filling out those forms and sending them in. That's based strictly on that count every year. And then we also have what are called Title II-A funds. Again, that's formula funds, and that is basically strictly for being our teachers and our administrators. That's for professional development and growing our own teachers. We have a wide level of allowable funds uses. We also have what's called a Title IV-A grant. Technology. We can use it for rounded education, and we can also use it for wellness. So that's where a lot of things we've been doing with development skills and things like that. They bought a new piano for kids to the Educators Rising competition in Washington, D.C. funding. Then we also have what's called the Rural and Low Income Schools. That's kind of a small grant we get every year. That's about $14,000, and we use that basically to support usually what Title I reading program any needs. And then we have the Indian education money, and that is basically based on all of our students that have filled out the 506 forms, and that basically says that they're enrolled with the tribe. The Johnson O'Malley group funding, which is maybe what you're thinking of, the Johnson O'Malley is a pass-through grant that comes to us from Council, Solomon, and King Island. And they give their Johnson O'Malley funding through work to us directly. It's their own Johnson O'Malley funding. They used to give it to the school district many years ago, but lately they've elected to keep it and use it, which they can. So those other three entities, they get such a small amount themselves. Just to support all of the cultural teaching programs. So that goes strictly to support any type of cultural activities in the school. That's what we do.
I get a lot of requests that come across my desk for various travel, for various programs. And one of the reasons I get a lot, although I don't really ask a lot of questions, is well, the school's cutting back on travel for a certain program. Or is there a, how does that work, I guess? Does this for certain sports programs and not for others, or are those events sort of non-school sponsored? Or?
So basically, what we do is we have a budget for travel, and it's we kind of allot it based on kind of many kids are in the program, and basically how they have a certain number of that are in their like regional competitions, and then they want to do outside of that to a certain extent is up to them. So there's a lot of different types of tournaments and things like that. So we would invite you to this tournament and that tournament, things like that. A lot of them kind of do some kind of a little bit of a quick send you, we'll pay you, some of them will like, so our kids have more people to pay type of thing. So, each of the teams get a budget. And it's like, this is your budget, you gotta work with it. If you wanna do more than that. And, we would like to get the, just, we give them money and it's kind of a rotating basis so that every year, each of the different teams get their uniforms and their equipment so that, on a rotating basis, everybody equally gets an opportunity to get and jackets and everything. So everybody gets that. So that's why, but, so some of the, they say, we want to go to, it's really great. There's going to be like 5 or 6 teams and get lots of playing. Well, we got to go fundraise. That's why you see a lot of those. We can't pay for every team, go to every tournament that's available, in the state. That's why you see a lot of
There were more volleyball games, there were more days, the office education, the future homemakers, education thing. I mean, we all had to, I mean, we were selling at all these events through the thing to make the money to. Parents ended up having to pay to let us go. It wasn't, that the, is, often, normally the school would pay for, the chaperones and those types of things, but for the students, we had to raise our own money. But just, the tournaments used to be in our region, I mean, we either went to Kotzebue, they came to Nome, a whole bunch of opportunities in there, now it's all in Anchorage. And there's fewer opportunities for the kids to actually, get out there.
Kotzebue whacked, they cut a lot of their, and when other districts cut their travel budget too, locally, then too, then all of a sudden you're like, you're right, all the stuff, there's no local places to go, so then they gotta go. And we have trimmed some money out of the travel budget in years that are tight. That's just a reality. Restore it when we can, like we got some additional funds, the city made a contribution this year, and things like that. We put some money back in the travel budget. That's, that was the conversation where, we put some money back in the after school programming and a good chunk of it went back in there. But, because that's a fund that we're allowed to carry forward for kids for next year. Spend it this year, it all goes into their individual accounts.
The regions are moving back into our regionals for like basketball or other sports are moving
I
back.
haven't heard that, so that's a question I would
You
have
heard
to ask. I would have to ask Pat.
And that's the start.
Basketball, I know.
Yeah.
Bethel's next year. Barrow's the year after.
It's a really good, that's a really
Yeah.
good thing for the local towns and communities.
It'd be great if they're coming back.
One regional people that, what's Anchorage.
People will travel to Anchorage to watch them, but I mean, when the whole damn gym was full of folks, I mean, Kotzebue come down here, there wasn't, you couldn't pack another person in the gym at that point. All right, take your presentation here and the,
if you feel, if you guys are feeling like, you know, we can do a little better than three.
What's the max right now? What's the max rate?
Well, it'd be 3.65.
3.4, I think, the last conversation I had with Genevieve, I think it's about 3.4. Based on our enrollment right now, it's based on our projected enrollment for next year. If our enrollment went up, the cap could go up, but it's based on our projected enrollment.
Was Dan ever on the city council?
I'm trying to remember, I think he was when I was interim, I think he was my first year.
Well, yeah, but pretty easy. Dan used to be.
Dan was.
Negotiator and.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, I can work.
Okay, well, we need to say thank you, Jamie, and we will get back to you. We've got another one on the line here, and yeah. Right.
That, my tennis racket.
Yes, sir.
At least 10 people asked this. There. So I did put in, design and engineering for the heating and ventilation for City Hall and Recreation Center. Uh, Change in the letter, where they accidentally cut and paste the ventilation system, I think, into the locker rooms, excuse me, in the City Hall, but we're not putting new locker rooms in City Hall. Just heating and ventilation, you got, and I'm gonna let John, because he's even closer to this than I am, walk you through what the proposals are to go out for, getting this now designed. The goal would be to go out sometime late summer, midsummer to late summer, get hopefully a good price, knowing that they would be building, actually installing the ventilation systems in the summer 23. So John?
Yes, sir. Hi, everybody. So we went out to competitive bid, as you all know, to solicit a design team to perform the upgrades to the heating and ventilation to 4 city facilities. The RFP is for City Hall, Rec Center, Mini Convention Center, and Public Works. That way we have somebody already on board if we have funding for the mini and the Public Works building, shop building. We've decided to pursue designs for City Hall and the Rec Center. So recently the design team, RSA is the lead, is the prime. They have architect, structural, hazardous materials folks, and RSA performs the M&E, mechanical, electrical services. So they had gone up there, I think it was last month or early this, it was early last month. And you guys have already approved an original contract amount of about $60,652. It was for the site visit, a site investigation report from that visit, as well as a preliminary design, which we've reviewed. And then based on that, they've generated the proposals to do they generated two proposals, one for the recreation center and one for City Hall to continue through to the construction phase. They have a hazmat fee for the rec center to do the hazardous materials survey for the areas that they will impact of $9,333. Their design fee for the rec center for all those disciplines is $170, $238. And then once that design is complete, that brings it a $65.95 and final design package, each with reviews by the city folks, public works folks as well. That will go out to bid, and at that point, there's a T&M construction administration fee that they've given us a budgetary number of $90,075. And so a total for rec center is $269,646 for the design and construction administration. The city hall, they have a hazardous materials fee. It's a little bit older building, $10,000, and you're going to be touching a lot more of it, I think. They have $10,475 for that hazardous materials survey. They have a design fee of $124,235, and the T&M construction admin fee of $74,002 for a total city hall design reno for the reno of $208,712. So you've already approved this project going forward in a previous council meeting, but I think that the intent here is to approve the spending of these dollars. I've generated a purchase order amendment for this project. We had a design contract in the original RFP, and that has been signed for the $60,000, $652 for the original preliminary design stages. I guess the desire is to continue forward as we've got, the report definitely identifies that these are well beyond their design service life. And the boilers at the rec center, as you also know, the second one I think has been turned off. The old second one that started leaking again, that's been turned off. We're now functioning off of the Dietrich boiler unit that was installed this year. Did we get it in? Yeah, I guess it was in early this year, Glenn, right?
Got it in, was it December that it was finally completed?
Yeah, it sounds about right. I know it was this winter we got that second boiler on board, the new boiler on board.
The second old boiler conked out in February, if I recall. And
Okay.
notified the council we have ordered the second boiler to have it here and probably installed this summer sometime.
Right. So yeah, the idea is to get one installed, a second installed, a new one installed this summer, so that we can go through the winter of 22-23 without incident before getting the upgrades to the rest of the. They're going to replace fin tube. They're going to replace unit heaters. They're going to replace ventilation ducting, and the goal is to bid that probably. The design's supposed to be done by August, so a bid in September, October timeframe.
So, John, this is also to address ventilation in the gym where there really is no ventilation system in the gym.
It's accurate. Yes.
I said gym, I said, sorry. And it also includes a new oil tank.
Yep, it includes a new oil tank. I believe that one's at City Hall. I think the oil tank at the rec might replace both of them. I can't recall off the top of my head, but I can open them. I'm just looking at one screen at a time here. But there's also turning the rec center generator into an automatic on-demand generator that's incorporated into the rec center fee. Trying to recall the other major one. Here, let's see.
It also includes in both buildings new fuel oils storage.
Yep, new
tanks.
storage tanks. Yep. Oh, the alarm system at City Hall. That was another one of the major inclusions. Updating to right now, I believe that the annunciators and everything, it's not functioning in City Hall.
Glenn, these are COVID funds that have been reserved for both of these projects. Is that correct?
Well, ARPA funds,
Yeah.
I've asked for you to consider, obviously, ARPA funds. I've asked for you to consider the surpluses that we had from the last 2 years, which are really CARES funds that can be redirected. And I am trying to see if we can get a grant through CDBG for coronavirus improvement funds, which would be ventilation. And it's a real tight timeline to get it in, but I suspect there's going to be another one right behind it afterwards. But the goal is that I'll know by this week when we might be requesting potentially a meeting on the 18th. I put in my notes. Because I have a class to attend, I think it's on the 13th.
So is it normal on these things, John, to add these task 3 into these things? I mean,
Construction admin, that was something that I mentioned to Glenn, that we could hold off at this time and add that once the project is ready for bid. But yes, usually if I'm bidding a job as an engineer, or I would like to see who the contractor is before I give my CA number because it varies dramatically, and that's why it's a T&M fee that they've given us for budgetary reasons. So we could either contract that now or wait.
Wait until we get further along into design so we really get a better idea what we think this is going to come out for construction cost.
These fees do include cost estimating at each phase of design so that we have a budgetary number to shoot for the construction.
get to RSA to do this, I guess, just question.
We did not a sole source. We did a competitive solicitation, RFP process, quals-based selection.
The sooner it doesn't get designed, the sooner it won't get built, so seems like we need to be moving forward. Yes, no, Glenn?
You know, what's bothering me is we're having to spend money this year to keep the things functioning till we can actually get it out. You know, it'd be like, I wish we didn't have to spend any money. We're spending on, in this building alone, I believe it's over $6,000 this year in parts that are broken or not, just to try to keep the building comfortable for the employees.
That's kind of what's going on with the school district too, under Nana, is that things that you spend it, they don't spend it until all of a sudden it's a catastrophe and then it's outside their contract. So anyway.
Yes.
John, do you have any idea what these projects might, ballpark what they might cost?
I'm a civil engineer. It's really hard for me to gauge that, but I mean, I had an estimator at one time run the numbers, but that was in 2017, maybe at the earliest, might have even been 2015. And the way things have changed with the ability to get materials and costs of labor and everything, I can't even hazard a guess right now what it would cost. I bet it will be high. I mean, the construction estimate will probably be, I would envision probably you're looking at about $1 million each at least.
John, I think you gave me, or someone gave me a price of 1.9 for the rec center and roughly a $500,000 for this building.
It might be a little more for that building with the hazmat and the fact that it might be a little bit cheaper for the rec center because we already will have the 2 boilers, but it might be a little bit more for City Hall, the age and the hazmat and then the occupied space. That's something to consider.
We didn't factor fire alarm system.
Yep, there's a fire alarm system being replaced in City Hall as well.
Where are we, just to update the council, the fire alarm system at the XYZ building is to the state fire marshal for review now?
That is correct. And as soon as we get the permit back from them, we can issue a bid onto the street, solicit quotes from qualified firms and get that done.
Hey, Sig, I apologize, the bubbles weren't up during the school thing, so I forgot to ask you if you had any comments on the school. Or comments or questions on this part?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Or through the process?
It's on the agenda tonight.
Oh, okay.
They asked for approval.
Okay. Take just a couple of second break. You want John to stick around? Is there any reason to keep him for the resolution? No?
Unless there's more questions, I don't think.
The one thing that would be helpful for me, I guess I can find out tomorrow what you guys decide, but in generating a contract amendment, whether or not we're going to include CA at this stage or not. That's correct.
You never do the project, you don't pay that out
Right.
regardless.
That's accurate.
Is that T&M rate gonna change potentially?
Anything could change between now and next year, and I would suspect it's going up by
Right.
next year.
So all we would be approving is a rate, correct?
Right.
With an estimate of what the total cost would be, but it, a T&M rate, like a hourly rate or whatever.
So this isn't a fixed cost necessarily?
No, it's not a fixed cost.
Okay, that's why I asked- that's why I asked-
100% T&M.
Okay, that's why I asked what the potential total cost might be, because to see
Yeah.
how this would be.
And when you asked
Fit in there.
that question, I thought you meant what the total project cost would be,
I did, but,
including construction.
but because this would be maybe kind of tied to that.
No, this is time and materials based on the number of hours they're gonna spend overseeing the contractor.
You're right,
So that
but if
really
you have a
doesn't.
$10 million cost and you have a fixed fee of, and then we don't have a $10 million cost, we have a lot less than that.
Right,
You have a fixed fee of 90,000 that they're putting out there as a fixed bid.
It's more of a budgetary number, gentlemen.
John, I don't think they heard you.
Sorry, it is more of a budgetary number at this stage because they don't know who the contractors are. They don't know any of that. It's to be revisited at 80% expenditure.
It's also really obligating ourselves other than to say, yes, we'd like this firm to do this, right?
That's accurate.
Okay, let's leave it in there because otherwise we need to change the numbers in the resolution.
yeah.
So we'll leave it in.
Sounds good.
You can go home. I mean,
All right. Thank you, everybody. Holler if you have any other questions. Glenn will relay them to me, I'm sure.
cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
you go back to Anchorage? Sit over there just so there's a little bit more of us are here.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like to sit.
Kind of like Wild Bill.
Podium right there.
Was against the wall.
Yeah.
I mean, the one time he didn't.
You
Got
got
one
shot.
back there, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a clear field of vision.
To have a public hearing.
Oh, yeah.
And I wasn't to schedule it when I found this out on
Is
Friday.
that your nickname?
Hey, because
Before they put the coffee in, I don't.
you put in your budget a hearing.
And it's a lot more expensive to get single suite.
I realize. There's no
Halfway through.
garbage for anything except a fat tire bike.
Too hard for combo machine.
April 4th, 2022 to order. Motion for.
Councilmember Brown,
Here,
Councilmember Henderson,
Manit tunga.
Motion by Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Brown to approve the agenda.
for Henderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson,
EE.
March 28th, is there a motion to adopt these minutes?
I'll make a motion.
second,
Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Martinson.
yes, Councilmember Topcock,
EE.
Is the March 18th marijuana and license. We had that on our last agenda. some information on this. I'd like this to roll to the next regular meeting. Email chain of the 31st through the 1st between the clerk and the seller sales tax commission regarding sales tax change, which is up for consideration a little later in the agenda. It's taken if it was to pass, would not be effective. Next communication is Shoals. Stating that the Arts Council is interested in facilitating the construction of an art mural on Front Street. I'd like to consider the council's opinion.
What city-owned buildings are there on Front Street besides this building and then the visitor center? So is there even a wall on either of those two buildings that would house a large mural? And then who with the ACSA mural from like 3 years ago, it was somewhere down here.
Isn't it still hanging on the building? Our past position has not to use City Hall as a
Billboard?
billboard. So as they are talking about, if you budget count, it's got Inuit photography training opportunity, but the application deadline has passed. Citizens' comments, other members of the public.
Two zero four zero one, an ordinance of for a temporary reduction of sales tax for the month of May, June, July, and August 2022.
This ordinance.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Councilmember Mark Johnson and Councilmember Martinson. Discussion.
Under discussion, I heard you mention that in that email chain between Bryant and the Sales Tax Commission that it couldn't affect May, but this is actually saying that we'd be doing it for May.
Would have to just be amended.
Yeah.
Okay, roll call please on the April 28th meeting.
EE.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Thank you. That brings us down to
Twenty-two zero four zero one, a resolution authorizing the city of Nome to apply for and participate in the US DOT
Is there a motion to adopt resolution 2204?
Resolution.
Second.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, happy to answer questions, but to just give a little bit more context, we are looking for this project planning and design funds for phases 2 and 3 so that we can ensure that we've got those on hand while we are actually in pursuit of construction funds and a number of other project funds. I'd like to reach out and apply for these funds with the intent of, right now the match is showing on page 2 of the strategy as 830,000. That's a rough number. The 3.322 total for the federal cost share. We think that this number is pretty close. We'll have it fine tuned here by the end of the week. But it is our intent to try and use state funds to match this based on the level of state funds. And we understand there's a Senate Finance Committee hearings here at the end of the week that they've asked for folks to call in for testimony. So it's my understanding that one or several of us will be talking to the Senate Finance Committee after getting a very good reception from the House Finance Committee on the construction funds for phase 1 that we've requested. I did identify in the budget for that request that there were some design funds that we would be looking for match initially. As those funds become available July 1, whatever the state does award, and the grant awards for USDOT are announced in the fall. So, crystal ball, that is the plan. Does that generate any questions?
Applied for last year successfully.
Correct. Then they have a significant more in funding to award this year. Last year, I think they said they had they funded about 8% of the applications they received because they just didn't have the volume to work with. This year they have 1.5 billion, 50% to rural projects, and the minimum of 80% on rural projects, but the secretary can elect to fund up to 100.
And so this is just putting in the application, and then if we awarded, then we would be having a resolution to accept it.
Correct.
Questions?
This, a couple meetings ago, when we authorized this, I think we were just about 1.6 million, we were taking out of the general fund to sort of keep this process moving along. So if we did get that, if whatever amount we got would go to reimburse for those, so we didn't have to spend out of the general fund. Is that correct? Is this
If I'm understanding you correctly, Councilman Henderson, this grant would not be reimbursing for any previous costs incurred prior to the signature of the grant agreement. But the reimbursement to the general fund is intended to come from port revenues as they are earned and available after covering our operational costs. Is that what you asked?
Yeah, so I was under the impression that when we approved that 1.6 million for the, I think it was it the
Nick,
but we wanted to continue the momentum and not lose any time on the design process. So we did approve that. The council approved, I think it was about 1.6 million. And I was under the impression that we would use operating funds to repay that if we were unsuccessful in applying for receiving grant funds.
Okay, yes, I do understand what you're saying. Those were for funds to keep our design engineer on the docks and roads moving forward up to 65% of phase one. And the intent was for those grants that it allow for previously incurred expenses to reimburse, that would be the case. On the grants that do not allow that, then they would be, and at that time, we didn't know what grants were going to be put on the street. There's a significant amount of money, as I know everybody understands, on a large number of grants that are coming out. So this particular grant won't allow us to apply, say, for any construction or inspection costs. So we've had to weed those out of this, but it's always possible we get another grant hitting the street that will cover previously incurred expenses that we could pursue on this project as well. So we haven't stopped looking, but at this time, it was I'm pretty much thinking we would be reimbursing those out of port revenues after operational costs. But as I said, we are scanning all of the funding opportunities. And if we see one for this type of a project that will cover previously incurred expenses, we will jump on it. But
I'm good. Yeah. Thank you.
Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Mike Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Resolution 220402.
220402, a resolution authorizing the city of Nome to apply for
Resolution 220402.
yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, this one is essentially the same focus, the same dynamic as it's being applied to the same funding opportunity. They will accept up to 3 applications, but this is for the completion of the Thornbush site, the laydown development site. We've completed about 8.2 acres of fill. And based on the current demand of laydown property for summers for revolving cargo and equipment, and winters for the vessel and storage laydown, we are definitely shy in laydown space. And once the contractor shows up in the spring of 24, keeping the stars aligned, we will be in even worse shape in order to accommodate the contractor some type of working space near the project site. It's as we've expressed in this application, this draft, it is essential that we expand that property site in order to push some of our more mobile people further out up onto the Thornbush pad and make space nearer the docks for those that require it, as well as a portion of the contractor for phase one. We're looking at 700. This number is probably closer than the last one. We're looking at 750,000 for the cash match, the total of 3.7. Same thing applies if It is our intent to seek some type of the state funds to provide the match based on the dollar value that is awarded. Construction, total dollars of construction that we've asked the state for is a fluid number, but we are, like I said, we're hoping to get the cash match there and we've got 2 more DOT grants coming up in the next 60 days that we'll be reaching out for as well.
So I'm seeing the asterisk here on secretary can choose to fund additionally on rural projects.
Correct. Up to 100%.
All right, well, we're hoping that we can get to actually come to visit Nome here in the next couple of months, and maybe he can bring good news that he's awarded these grants at 100%. Good questions. Accept these at a later date, but if we don't apply,
Member Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson,
Yes.
Councilmember Topcott,
thank you. Next is resolution 220403. And Mr. Clerk, if you wouldn't mind reading this in its entirety, please.
R 220403, a resolution recognizing April as Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month.
You didn't hear that? If you wouldn't mind reading it in its
Oh,
entirety.
the entire resolution.
Yeah.
My bad. Resolution recognizing April as Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month. Whereas trauma suffered early on in life has the propensity to affect the victim for the rest of their life. And whereas child abuse, one preventable such trauma, presents a clear threat to the future of Nome citizenry. And whereas the month of April is recognized by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Children and Families as National Child Abuse Awareness Month. And whereas other organizations in Nome, such as Coeric's Child Advocacy Center, recognize April as Child Abuse Awareness Month. And whereas the City of Nome is committed to working with its partners to end child abuse within its corporate limits. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Nome recognizes April as Child Abuse Prevention Awareness Month and commits to working with its local partners to ending child abuse within its corporate limits.
Motion to adopt resolution 240403.
I'll make the motion.
Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Mark Johnson, roll call, please.
Councilmember Henderson,
Yes.
Councilmember Mark Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson,
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock, Member Brown,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you. And then we have resolution 220404, Mr. Clerk.
220404, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement with RSA Engineering to upgrade the heating and ventilation systems in City Hall and the Nome Recreation Center.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 220404?
Second.
Councilmember Brown, Councilmember Martinson. Discussion?
So just to clarify, the last whereas mentions a fee proposal of $269,000 for design and construction for rec center and $208,000 for city hall. That includes estimated T&M amount for the services that would be provided during the construction phase for oversight of the program, correct?
That is correct. Task 1 is a hazmat survey. Task 2 on each of is the design. And once that's all done, then those are fixed fee. It's time and materials for construction oversight. Roll call, please.
Mark Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson,
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock,
EE.
Member Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Half of NGU. In the last year, they were actually able to restore the communications to the wind turbines. So they're once again integrated into our system and providing their contribution to Nome. It was a failed fiber optic spot, kind of wore through, our connection became loose. Starting the recruitment process to add a person to the power plant crew, the line crew, and the water sewer crew, to fill vacancies created through retirements and a couple of temp positions, or a temp position for the summer. So Dave Ogenin is leaving the line crew. Marty's leaving the power plant. Arnie left the power plant, and we're anticipating another fellow within the next year. So trying to get somebody moved into that.
A lot of long-term folks.
It is.
Sewer utilities have plans when we get a little bit warmer weather to be jetting out the
Yes,
puddles that we have.
not the jet puddles, no, but the sewers.
Sewers, so
So
the
they do not
puddles can
become-
go away maybe, that are currently frozen.
Oh, you're talking about storm drains.
Storm drains.
That would be the cities, and we actually have our old back truck.
Through the utilities, it's through the city. Well, I'll save that question for Glenn in a couple minutes.
Glad to help with that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we'll just move right on then to
Have my report in front of you. There's not much more I can add. A lot of time was taken up this week with contract negotiations. That's pretty much it.
please.
Does our public works department have plans to jet the storm drains so we can free up
Yes.
the puddles that are currently frozen?
Yes, we are planning on that. That's a normal activity.
Yeah.
You know, where they'll actually be turning on warmers, so help melt some of the pipes. So we can flush them. I mean, that right out here, there's enough stone sitting on our, we've put down an awful lot of gravel and grit this year because it's been so icy, so it's gonna even make it more of a challenge this year.
To the audience that would like to address the council this evening.
Mark Johnson,
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Councilmember Martinson.
Oh, just a little update on the community event for the basketball for the boys. Scheduled for April 30th with the rec center from 5 to 7. They're gonna have main meal, hamburgers and hot dogs provided, and then asking anybody who comes if they want to bring a side. And they're gonna have team photos and all the trophies displayed and jerseys and stories and all sorts of fun stuff going on. Eskimo dancing at King Island is going to be there to dance, so yeah, should be a good event for the whole community to celebrate everybody. That's all I got.
Sean is gonna be there tomorrow night?
Yes.
Represent the city.
Councilmember Topcock,
No comments.
Councilmember Brown,
No comment.
Councilmember Henderson.
Regarding the sales tax holiday, if we could have for second reading, we're still early in the budget process, but if we could have some budget assumptions regarding that, so we can
Working on that right now.
so we can have a little bit of quantitative data at least to look at it and base our decisions on. So, that's all I've got. Thanks.
Councilmember Martinson touched on the basketball thing coming up here at the end of the month. And to mention is the fact from Coach Vanessa Tabone that the Nome Academy team walked away from the 4th annual Juneau Traditional Games with 6 gold medal, 2 silver, 2 bronze, and 3 coaches. Beyond proud of this group of athletes that also had 1 4th place and 1 5th place ribbon. So I'm not sure who all the were that were there, but great showing and congratulations. Bottom of the state to show them Annex rule. Moving on then to we have an executive session on union negotiations. Is there a motion?
Motion to recess into executive session.
Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Martinson. Council stand in recess. The time is 7.
One of the participants in the down in Juneau is your student rep.
Paris.
Oh,
And
really?
Parker, and Parker, Kennick,
And Teague.
and Teague. But they only have 5 or 6. So they must have done a lot of events.
A lot of.
Yeah, I would say,
I should have got all their names, but.
yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if Parker won